I've never played a FNAF game. No, seriously, I have never touched any of these games, unless you count that one time I played a recreation of Ultimate Custom Night that was made in Scratch, but I think that's a story for another day. FNAF is a game that needs literally no introduction unless you just started using the internet yesterday, but okay fine, FNAF is a game where you sit around in an office for a couple of hours watching cameras and trying to keep the wacky animatronics from stuffing you into an animatronic suit, rinse and repeat for 5 nights, and yeah, that's basically it, other than the confusing mess that is the lore for almost every one of the games. It started out as a series I had some interest in trying for myself, but eventually it got to a point where I was just getting a little bit tired of seeing it over and over again, because each new entry just looked weirder than the last, and at a certain point I'd just rather watch Markiplier play the games than sit through them myself. There's a ton of these games too: FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4, Sister Location, Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, Help Wanted, and soon enough there was gonna be a 9th entry to this long-lasting series of animatronic nightmares. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach was announced at a PlayStation-related event, and people were really hyped for this game. I mean, after all, it seemed like it was gonna be the biggest the series would go in scope, but then it got delayed, and it got delayed again, and then some questionable looking gameplay trailers came out, and over time, people, myself included, became increasingly more skeptical about how this game would turn out because of how little they had really shown off, and that gameplay trailer really didn't help. Up until it actually came out, I had no intention of playing it myself, but for some reason the fact that it was an official free roam Five Nights at Freddy's game didn't click with me until release day, and so I kinda just convinced myself to purchase it. An official free roam FNAF game was something I had wanted to see the series do for quite a while, as a lot of fan games had tried doing this, mind you with mixed results, but I just thought it would be neat to be able to fully explore some pizzeria like the first game's location, but we'll get into why it didn't exactly pan out well for Security Breach later in the video. So with it in mind that I've never played a FNAF game before, do not expect me to know every little detail about the FNAF lore whenever I talk about the story, because if there's something I miss out on, I'm sure I'll get a ton of comments about it. Just don't be a jerk about it, because I'm a big stupid head and I already know about it. Trying to piece together FNAF lore is like trying to jump through the eye of a needle while riding a unicycle and juggling pineapples, which is to say it's needlessly convoluted and complicated. Anyway, FNAF Security Breach follows Gregory, a stupid kid who, okay, this game has a very confusing introduction. So we're introduced to the glam rock animatronics. They're rocking out on stage, but uh-oh, Freddy does an oopsie and dies spontaneously. Roll the credits! Okay, but really, apparently some kid named Gregory was hiding inside of Freddy's stomach cavity, and Freddy just didn't even notice this. Oh, and Freddy as well as the other animatronics can just talk in this game. Like, they can hold complex conversations just like any other human being, but for the most part you only see Freddy demonstrate this, and am I the only one who finds this just a little bit weird? Like, there's just something incredibly uncanny about the fact that Freddy freaking Fazbear is talking to me, and the game just expects me to take this 100% seriously. I just can't do that whenever he looks at me like this. Freddy tells Gregory that the Pizzaplex is going to close soon, which is bad news because then we'll be trapped in the establishment for the next 6 hours, so Freddy helps guide us to the Pizzaplex's entrance, avoiding death by animatronics along the way, and oh no, the door closed! Who could have possibly expected this wacky turn of events? Now Gregory is forced to survive the next 6 hours in a robot-infested mall of fun and death. And before I forget to mention this later in the video, there's also this security guard named Vanessa in this place, but for some reason Gregory just doesn't trust her from the very beginning of the game, even though he's given, like, no reason not to trust her. Like, why? I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the video, because right now it's just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense since there's a spoiler-related reason, which is probably super freaking obvious. Okay, crazy theory here. If all Gregory has to do is survive until 6 AM, which is when the doors reopen, and we have this ginormous mall to hide in until then, why can't we just do that? I mean, there's so many hiding spots that even if one of the animatronics got suspicious, you could easily quickly move to another room and find a hiding spot in there, but this is a video game and we gotta do game stuff for the game to be a game, so let's game, I guess. Since Gregory is an impatient piece of work, he's gotta get out of this place as soon as possible, and so Freddy offers to help him in any way he can by guiding him with the aid of a Fazwatch that we can use to view mission objectives, chat with Freddy, and view the mini cameras inside this place. To be able to escape the Pizzaplex, Gregory can't just exit cause, you know, and unfortunately a lot of important areas in the Pizzaplex are blocked off by locked doors which we can open by using security passes. There are different levels of security passes, each one we get allows us to access more areas in the game, and so we basically spend a majority of the game just looking for these passes in the hope that one will unlock an exit. Before we get to anything else, I have to say that I really like the voice acting in this game. I know I said it was a little uncanny earlier, and at first it was, you know, with this being the first time we're hearing Freddy speaking full-on sentences, but the voice cast in this game genuinely does a great job. My favorite voice performance has got to go to the Sun and Moon animatronic though. I did get very annoyed seeing his cutscene over and over again, but regardless, Kellen Goff did a wonderful job voicing the character.
Oh, no! Why would you do that?
Speaking of, the first security pass is found in a daycare, which is a generator section and a horror game. Well, you know, maybe it's just that the first section is a little lacking in creativity. I do think it's a neat idea though, having us explore a play place, but I just don't understand, like, why are there generators in a daycare meant for young children? Did none of the upper management employees think this was the least bit concerning? Like, imagine if one of the generators short circuits, so they gotta call a repairman to fix it, but he's just having to go around the children to get to the generator and fix it. But this is a Fazbear themed location, so maybe I'm thinking a little too optimistically. After we're done doing the security guard's dirty work, we're finally almost to 1 AM, but unfortunately for us, every hour the power is diverted to these recharge stations. We'll use these more later in the game to recharge Freddy's power. Now this is something I didn't mention in the script that I feel like should be brought up because it's kind of confusing, like I just don't understand this. So once we get to the recharge station, Freddy basically just says that he wants to help us but he doesn't know why, and the other animatronics want to kill us, but we also don't know why. Like, there's a reason brought up for this later in the game for why the other animatronics act the way they do, but it's like still kind of unclear why Freddy acts the way he does, like helping Gregory and all of that. Once we're out of there, we basically have free reign of the Pizzaplex, any area that a level 1 access card gets us anyway. A lot of time is spent just trying to look for an exit to the Pizzaplex, only to find it's either locked to a higher level access card or just completely blocked off in general. Unfortunately though, it's a rocky road to get to those areas. The game gets repetitive pretty fast, like you can really tell they didn't have enough ideas to fill this game with, which is actually really ironic considering in a developer interview they stated that any ideas they got they wanted to fit into the game somehow, and it still feels empty. You want to know why? Because over half of the stuff you do in this game is so lazily put together, no ideas are fleshed out past the bare basics. Every stealth section where you gotta get around one of the animatronics is the same over and over again, and I'll admit it was actually kind of cool having to use the Fazwatch to view the cameras and see where I was in comparison to the animatronics to be able to avoid them, even if I had a really difficult time figuring out the layout of each area. It's something about the perspective of the cameras that was messing with my head, like I just couldn't piece together where I was in relation to what I would see through the cameras, if that makes any sense. The novelty wears off pretty quickly because of that and molds into an annoying and boring gameplay loop. Find a hiding spot, wait for the staff bot and or animatronics to go past you, jump out, rinse and repeat until the section is complete. And dude, speaking of the staff bots, they really don't help with this whatsoever because there's like 50 of them in each area, and if one spots you, an animatronic will usually spawn like 30 feet behind you, and it's so cool and awesome and I love it, and it's not just annoying, it's stupid. Dude. It gets to a point where the real threat of the game isn't the animatronics, it's the dang staff bots. I can usually get around animatronics pretty easily because these areas are so big, with a couple of exceptions, so in the larger areas of the game I'd barely run into them unless it was in a scripted sequence. Even then, the animatronics themselves aren't very aggressive, like I barely ever saw them checking the hiding places, and another thing that makes them less threatening is Freddy, who you can call over to your location. Sometimes the game doesn't let you do this depending upon where you are, but most of the time you can, so once you do get him over to you, you can quite literally just get inside of him and walk past any and all threats. Like, what? Sure, Freddy's power is somewhat limited, which makes no sense considering the other animatronics are out and about for the full 6 hours, but you know, I'll let that oversight slide. But as long as you're not using it all willy-nilly, you'll be just fine. Of course, you can't always abuse this, but it's just bizarre to me how they never address in-game how the other animatronics should be able to see Gregory getting inside of Freddy literally at the daycare. Like, why didn't this get brought up later? There's honestly some potential here for at least a cutscene or something where Gregory gets ripped out of the Freddy and Freddy has to fight off the animatronics while Gregory escapes. We do already visit parts and services a couple of times in the game where we repair Freddy, so I don't know. Other than that, I certainly don't mind being able to hide in Freddy in certain sections, but I just don't understand why nothing was done to prevent you from using it to make certain sections a heck of a lot easier. Unfortunately, in regards to the issue I have with the animatronics just not being threatening though, I don't know if there's much else they could have done with that other than having the staff bots all over the place, just because of the size of the Pizzaplex, which is another problem I'll talk a little bit more about later. This isn't an excuse for the lack of creativity though. It would have been nice if they changed up the patterns that the staff bots have or introduced some more stealthy animatronic that could catch you by surprise. I would be lying if I said the game was a terribly unplayable trash game though, because there are some decent ideas here. For example, the daycare segment I mentioned is alright, if really cliche. I mean, a generator segment in a horror game? How unexpected! Okay, sarcastic cynicism aside, I thought this was executed alright, and it's not too difficult once you get a path mapped out mentally. Another idea I liked was the security office sections where you're stuck in an office and you have to keep Montgomery and Roxanne from getting in, but the difficulty on those are a bit inconsistent. In the first one, the door's power runs out in about 30 seconds, so I had to stand in the office for the last 30 seconds and hope one of them wouldn't catch me, but in the second office section it's a lot more manageable to a point where it's kind of just pathetically easy. If you take too long, then Vanny comes around to jump scare you, but it's super easy, so that normally shouldn't happen. Oh, and Vanny, I should probably explain her. So there's this part where Vanessa captures Gregory in an elevator and she brings him to this room and kind of just tells him he's been a bad kid, and so out of nowhere, Vanny just kind of shows up next to the room and starts to try and capture you, so you exit through the vent, and Now, being as I'm not a FNAF fan, I had no idea what was going on here, but apparently Vanny is supposed to be the main antagonist of the game, and like, this is how you introduce them? I just don't understand. She shows up a couple of other times in the game, but she doesn't really do anything other than skip around and just smile at you. What is there to even say? I'm at a loss for words. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. Another section that was okay was Phaser Blast. Really just a whatever section though. The only thing that made it slightly more interesting was throwing Chica into the arena. Also, the rules instructor was really kind of funny, I'll admit that.
There are 2 rules you must follow at all times. Rule number 1, no running, no climbing, no jumping, no hitting, kicking, pushing, shoving, no shooting fist blasters in, near or close to other players' eyes. Being flashed in the eyes may induce seizures, blindness, or semi-permanent paralysis. If you are flashed in the eyes, immediately flush your eyes with soap and water and blink repeatedly until vision is restored. Rule number 2, have fun.
But then you have the endoskeletons. Jeez, dude, these guys suck. It's literally just the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. Like, why? Why is this in a FNAF game? Could you not have made the endoskeletons more aggressive in some other way, or was it really that hard to be creative? The area they're in isn't even fun anyway, it's just super annoying as the hallways are just narrow enough that you might find yourself constantly hiding to ward them off, and even then they just run around in straight lines, and it's so confusing. I found myself stuck on this for an hour just running into the wall. And even then, for some reason, the game feels the need to bring back the endos later in the game. In all fairness, these ones are much easier to avoid since you can just call Freddy over and escape by getting inside of him, but I feel like pulling my hair out with this game sometimes, dude. This is the problem I had, like right in motion, this is the problem. The security office sections were alright, those were decent ideas, but the execution on both of them were just kind of poor, but why not flesh that out more? At least those sections fit into a FNAF game, but this just feels like something you would see in a fan game. There isn't any creative twist here either, it's just weeping angels. If you look at them, they don't move, but if you're not looking at them, they run towards you. I wanted to quit playing this game so badly as soon as I saw the endoskeletons again, but I've spent far too much time writing this video as is, so I might as well try to slog through the rest of it, I guess. It's just a shame because I kept thinking the next area might have some fun segment, but there's hardly any of that. It all feels so messily put together at a certain point too, like the game just begins dragging because of all of what you're doing doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. In fairness though, what I said earlier about the stealth sections isn't entirely true. There are two other stealth sections that actually make you evade the animatronics rather than the staff bots, and I liked that. Specifically later in the game, you just kind of decide to decommission the animatronics to get specific parts to upgrade Freddy, because why exactly? I don't understand, dude. Like, in the context of the story, there's two areas you need to open a gate to actually be able to progress to them, but because Gregory says so, I guess we're doing it anyway, even if we shouldn't even need the other animatronics parts anyway. But looking past that, they did create some neat sections around getting their parts. To get Chica's, you have to get Monty's mystery mix, some food mixture from the bowling alley in the upper floors, bring it back down to the area underneath the food court into this trash compactor. Once that's done, we can turn on this generator to power the trash compactor and lure Chica over to the garbage and finally destroy her. This cutscene is super satisfying, particularly because I found myself getting caught or chased after the most by her in particular. But oopsie doopsie, turns out she's not fully decommissioned, as after we take her voice box, we have to navigate through the sewers and around her to get back to the upper floors. This is one of the few areas in the game that actually gets kind of close to being the kind of environment I would have expected to have to explore for a proper free roam FNAF game, like an old rundown area. It would have made more sense than just having some random kid get stuck in a pizzeria anyway. Even though it's another generator segment, I can get by that because at least now I'm actually having to avoid an animatronic rather than one of the annoying staff bots. There's also the part where we steal Roxy's eyes and have to get her to smash through these doors while she can't see us. Both of these areas are nice little diamonds in the rough, I suppose. The Music Man section too is great. Not gonna show any footage of it though, because I think you should see it played out in full to get the actual, full effect of it. But these short sections don't save the rest of the game from being either annoying, repetitive, or just plain confusing due to terrible hints. And even then, at a certain point, the game just stops giving you actually decent hints just in general. Once I finished the phaser blaster area, the game's poor attempts at guiding you in the right direction were absolutely useless, so I found myself running circles around the entire pizzaplex until I just happened to stumble upon a random bag that when I collected it allowed me to view a staff message that told me basically where I needed to go. For context, the game leaves a lot of these prize boxes and duffel bags lying around. The prize boxes are mostly useless, however duffel bags give you some messages to read that give you a little more intel on the pizzaplex and the animatronics, but none of it was actually info I needed to know until now. And keep in mind, I found this bag in the entrance to the pizzaplex in a random room. It's not like the game told me to go here. I was just getting at a point where it's like, I was tired of walking around aimlessly, so I just started grabbing whatever I saw in the hopes that it would give me something, anything, because the mission hints are complete and utter garbage at this point. Incredible game design, 10 out of 10, you get an Oscar. And you know, I could deal with it if it was just a one-time instance of this sort of thing happening, but it happened multiple other times. Trying to get to Roxy Raceway for one seemed impossible because of this one stupid little design. So you have to go through these areas that are under construction to get to the Roxy Raceway. You can get to the Glamrock Hair Salon, and I don't remember if there's anything particularly important here, but the area you need to go to is blocked off by these gates, which can only be opened if you've upgraded Freddy with either the voice box or Monty's claws. Now you can only get one of these upgrades. The other one is inaccessible because a little earlier in the game you get a party pass which gives you the option of going to Phaser Blast or Monty Golf. I chose Phaser Blast, which meant I would get the voice box upgrade, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because the gates that can only be opened with the claws are very obviously marked, meanwhile the voice activated gates aren't. I hadn't even run into one of these gates up until this one in Roxy Raceway, so I had no idea what they looked like, and I spent around an hour or two just extra running around getting nowhere because the developers couldn't at least try to make this gate a little bit more obvious. But I've been complaining about the gameplay for like however many minutes now, so how about we take a little break and talk about another issue the game has. That issue being, the game is bafflingly poorly optimized. The only things that change from each graphical setting is the quality of the lighting and textures, and some of you might be thinking to yourselves, okay, but what's the issue? The issue is that textures and lighting are all that's optimized. Nothing to do with model quality or what's loaded in. Nope, if an area makes the game start to lag for you, changing the graphical settings will have little bearing on the performance. I believe the issue stems from the fact that the game doesn't unload old maps, so say you're in the main hall, then you go up to the second floor, the main hall will still be loaded in, so if you play the game for a long enough time, everything that's loaded in will really start eating up memory, and then you'll just have to manually restart the game to offload that memory. This is making it feel like it was just yesterday when I was complaining about Sonic Colors Ultimate having poor optimization issues. Good times. Anyway, the fact that the models don't have any lower quality settings probably doesn't help with this, because there's almost always a ton of these staff bots loaded in that just patrol and mop the floors. Add on top of that the cameras, and man, it's just like, how do you optimize a game this poorly? Like, genuinely? Personally, I've only had the game start chugging for me a handful of times, but these are basic optimization features that all 3D games include nowadays, and that's not even considering PS4 players who don't have access to any quality settings whatsoever, so whatever performance they get due to the poor optimization is what they're stuck with. Something that I've heard would have helped is if they implemented culling, which as I understand it, culling basically means that anything you're not looking at, objects and such, is unloaded or made very low quality to save on memory and to keep anything you're actually looking at looking nice. And just based on some gameplay experiences I've had, it seems like the game loads in everything at the same time and has it all constantly at the highest quality. I won't sit here and claim that implementing culling would be like having a magic light switch you turn on and it suddenly fixes all of their performance issues. I'm sure there'd be a lot of stuff in the game that you would have to be reworking to make this sort of change possible, and even then I'm not a game developer myself, so there's most certainly other things that I'm not taking into consideration with culling. Regardless of the fact, this is such a well-known development tool that it should have at least been considered in development, and if not culling, then why couldn't Security Breach have lower quality models for the characters so that when they get too far away from the player's view, the game swaps the higher quality model for a lower quality one? It's bizarre to me, but I want to refrain from repeating myself too much, and this is a review of FNAF Security Breach as a whole, and I've taken up nearly a page of the script writing all of this into the video, so I'll stop talking about the optimization for now and get into something a little bit more important, but it's just mind-boggling to me because FNAF fan game developers have been able to handle this better than FNAF Security Breach as a whole. The game, aesthetically speaking, is okay. I have a hard time convincing myself half of the time that it's supposed to be a FNAF game, though. The only thing that's grounding me in reality is the constant imagery of the animatronics on the walls, and I will say that I like the animatronics designs. Other than Freddy, I think something about being able to see how tall he is disturbs me just a little bit, besides the fact he looks like a crazed lunatic 24/7, and speaking of which, the in-game models really don't do these designs justice. The jump scares too, like dude, look at them, they just awkwardly shake their faces in front of you, and then we have the worst one of all, the Vanessa jump scare, dude. It's honestly impressive how they made something less threatening than the Springtrap jump scare from FNAF 3. It's difficult for me to find the animatronics threatening whenever it feels like they don't even know what they're doing most of the time. Like, okay, they're robots, and I get that, but it puts them in this weird gray area whenever they look like this most of the time, but they talk, act, and really just feel like regular, intelligent people. I do kind of wish we got to see the other animatronics talk a little bit more and like have conversations with each other. I think it would have been cool to have a segment where you're going through these vents and you find the animatronics having this meetup to try and figure out, you know, where Gregory is and how to stop him or whatever, how to catch him. Because like the animatronics have these distinct personalities to them, and I feel like it would have been fun to see these played up a little bit more, because as they are in the full game, it's just kind of underutilized. They don't really do a whole lot with the characters. But let's get back into the main game, because I was really beginning to wonder when this game was going to end after a while. It feels like it's way too long for its own good, even though it probably isn't as long as I think it is, and that could mainly be attributed to just how dull so much of the game is, and not even the ending can save this. Spoiler alert for anyone who cares, I'm gonna talk about the endings all I want for a bit here, so you can skip ahead if you'd like. Immediately after you're done installing Roxy's eyes into Freddy, we have another segment where we gotta avoid the moon since it's close to 6 AM, but this time we're heading straight for the entrance. Once we get there, we're given a choice to either leave or stay and find any other secrets the Pizzaplex might be hiding. Freddy? Buddy, do you realize you're asking a literal child to put himself into danger by staying inside of the location he's been trying to escape for the past 6 hours? Honestly, like, what are you even thinking? I don't understand. Also, there's something else just randomly brought up here that I don't remember being brought up at all earlier in the game.
Freddy, if I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances.
Like, what? How does Gregory even know about this? We don't even know about Gregory other than the fact that he got trapped in this place and wants to escape, so like, why drop this information now? Wouldn't it have made more sense to drop subtle clues towards the fact that children had gone missing here? Like, there's 2 random staff maintenance notes in the Pizzaplex that vaguely mention this, but they aren't even required pickups. Oh, and I guess I should mention this, because apparently Vanny is behind all of this. I didn't feel the need to mention Vanny much earlier, because despite the fact that they're the main antagonist of the game, Vanny does literally nothing. She shows up in, like, free areas and skips around, and that's about it. There's a couple of endings involving her, but there's no reason given to us for why we're even supposed to care about Vanny, or even the fact that she's supposed to be Vanessa, which I guess was supposed to be a plot twist or something, but I don't know. It was already pretty obvious, so I'm not sure. I find it really funny though how from the very beginning Gregory just finds her suspicious for absolutely no reason. I mean, I guess if I was a child and trapped in a pizzeria, I'd be a little bit hesitant at first to trust anyone, but I'd be able to trust a real human being faster than an animatronic bear that could probably bite my face off in 2 seconds. I guess there is the burn trap ending that tries to give more of a reason as to why Vanny is there. This one just absolutely, like, confuses me though. I cannot make sense of this. Basically, there's this area where you and Freddy fall underground, presumably to an older Fazbear Pizzeria location like the Pizzeria Simulator, I guess. Down in this place is where Burn Trap is also located though, and he's what's taking control of Vanny, and he starts trying to take control of Freddy too, so you have to burn him while also warding off any oncoming animatronics, and once you've burned him enough, I guess he just dies or something, and then we escape the Pizzaplex. I don't get it. I don't understand. What just happened? From what I can understand, and going off of some theories I've heard, this area we fall into is the FNAF 6 location, the pizzeria simulator, and this Springtrap looking character is meant to be Afton, but he's referred to as Burntrap because clever, I guess, and this is the same Afton from the end of Pizzeria Simulator, even though he should be dead. I also heard some theories that this is Glitchtrap, which is William Afton's digital footprint, like his soul or something, put back into his old body, but before the events of Security Breach because he's not fully back yet. So he takes control of Vanessa, who becomes Vanny, and gets her to put him back in his old body for Glitchtrap because he always comes back or something, but why? And also, a very important question, how? Am I just stupid or something, or what? Because I don't get how William Afton just has this magic ability to take control of people. If he's meant to be Glitchtrap, then okay, I can kind of understand that since he's like a digital footprint, but how did he even come back to begin with? I try to make sense of this, but the lore of FNAF has gotten way too freaking big for its britches. It would probably help if I was a FNAF fan to begin with, but even then, I think it would still confuse me. A reason being, I thought Help Wanted was supposed to be somewhat of a, series reset, where the events of the previous games likely did happen, but not in the way that we saw, but Security Breach kind of makes it seem like they're backpedaling on that. Can anyone at all explain this mess to me? I would really hate to be a FNAF theorist, honestly. Above all of this, the point that I'm getting at is that these endings feel really unsatisfying. After you're done burning Burntrap, the most we get is a little close-up of him, and then we escape, and that's it. It's cool to see William Afton again, even if I can't understand it at all, but where's the satisfactory conclusion to this? We can't see Freddy go head-to-head with Burntrap or Vanny or anything like that, and at that rate they don't even really try to explain at all why Burntrap is down here or why the Pizzeria Simulator location is built below the Security Breach location. How does that make any sense at all? For a game that's trying to appeal to a more mainstream audience, you would think they would at least attempt to explain some of the things that happened in the previous games that lead up to this ending, but no, we just see Burntrap show up, burn him a couple times, he dies, and no one elaborates. I don't know about everyone else, but personally I think Pizzeria Simulator had the best ending in the series because of how it tied up everything into a nice little bow, but here it's like they want to address what they introduced in Help Wanted, but they don't want to commit to the new villain, so they just bring up William Afton as the mastermind again, and I'm under the assumption that's supposed to be him anyway. Again, please let me know if I'm wrong about any of this or just misunderstanding it, because I'm at least 90% sure I'll misunderstand a lot of it. I just wish they would have focused a little more on Vanny, because in one ending we're shown that she controlled the animatronics, and more could have been done with this idea earlier in the game to make her seem like a much more threatening character. I mean, I can get over the fact that Gregory already knew Vanessa was sus, because it was already obvious to the players who Vanny even was, but they should have taken advantage of that instead of just sitting on this character for the entire game and doing nothing up until the very end. It really baffles me, not just the mess that is the story, but Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach in general. From a gameplay standpoint, it being free roam isn't inherently a problem. I understand that many people who loved the much more simplistic resource management frill of the previous games in the series, but at the same time there were those fans who wanted to see the series go in a different direction or just be free of the office to explore a little bit, and is that really where the issue stems from? Personally, I don't think so. Believe me, despite all of the issues I have with the game, Security Breach does have potential. The problem is that they tried to cram way too many ideas into this game, and most of it never gets fleshed out past the bare basics, not to mention how overly large this pizzeria is in comparison to any of the previous locations, and that is just one of the many reasons for why Security Breach ended up being a generic and mediocre horror game at best for me. I won't sit here and tell you the game is straight up trash, because I did enjoy a few of the stealth sections, but as I said earlier, they're all the same, and you do so much walking around in this game with little else mixed in other than the occasional hiding spot, so you can imagine that got a little bit repetitive and tiresome after a while. One thing I think they could have done to help fix this is to change up the staff bots later in the game, or just outright remove them. Focus more on what's actually meant to be the threat of the game instead of these dinky little robots, and make staff bots more stealthy, maybe make certain staff bots destructible, really anything. I just think this game game could have done a whole lot better in terms of variety and content, which is still very ironic for a handful of reasons I'm sure you already know. Might I be so bold as to bring up a little piece of comparison? Hello Neighbor and Bending the Ink Machine are two games I immediately think of whenever trying to come up with comparisons to Security Breach, but for the sake of brevity, I'm pointing towards Hello Neighbor. As much of a mess as that game was, at least it had ideas, and the developers had a decent idea for the game to begin with, and you can definitely see that with the earlier builds of the game. The game just has this issue where it's very poorly executed, but FNAF Security Breach clearly had issues very early on into the pre-production phase, and they wanted to cram more and more into this game, and so eventually it got a little out of control and way too ambitious for a team as small as Steel Wool Studios. Even ignoring the issues of the game's performance, the bugs, the pure optimization, the messy story, and lackluster gameplay, no amount of delays could have fixed this. And it's a shame because you can tell there was a lot of work put into this game, especially whenever you look back at the early trailers, but a lot of that cool stuff they were trying to put in was unfortunately cut out due to their lack of foresight. I understand anything can happen whenever a game is in development, lots of changes can happen, but you can't deny that what was there looks a heck of a lot cooler than what we got in the final release. If they cut down on the scale of the game and focused on what makes the good scenarios in this game fun and kind of creepy, then they'd be golden, or at least they'd have a decent game. Like, I loved the atmosphere the daycare gave off, the sewers, honestly those were pretty nice. Mind you, I do feel like Security Breach loses a lot of the horror appeal of the older titles because overall I did not think Security Breach was particularly scary other than these two segments. And even then I feel like saying that is stretching it a little bit. I still hold the belief that this game could have been equally interesting had it been about someone trespassing on an old rundown pizzeria that ties into the other locations, or just sparks something new, because I don't think it was necessary to have Afton return. That just felt like a bit much, even for a series about spirits inhabiting animatronics, but no matter how many explanations are given for his return, I just don't think I'll understand it. From what I can gather, Help Wanted was meant to help set up the plot for Security Breach, so nothing could have been done about it without Help Wanted's plot being changed, which is unfortunate. Scott honestly should have ended the whole Afton plot off at Pizzeria Simulator, and instead have Vanny be someone who was influenced by Afton in one way or another into her bad deeds just out of pure bitterness, instead of having the sole focus of bringing him back. Vanny could have been a fine replacement anyway if I'm being honest, but instead of being intimidated by her, I was genuinely just confused the first two times I saw Vanny. Like, I still don't know quite what to make of it because that's just not how you introduce the main villain of the game. I really wanted to like this game. I thought this would be what got me into FNAF because this was trying to be something that would appeal to more mainstream audiences. Free Roam FNAF was an idea I thought would be really cool to see as an official game, rather than the fan-developer interpretations, but I guess the developers weren't quite suited for this kind of game, and I'm not even trying to say this to be condescending whenever I say that, because they're not a bad team, but I feel like they should have started development at a much smaller scale. The size of the Pizzaplex and the amount of areas you explore, there's a lot to see in this game, not even including the secret areas, so obviously not everything is going to get equal treatment. But how would I improve it? I've said a handful of times already that I do believe the game has potential, so where is it? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I do like some of the stealth sections. Unfortunately though, despite these being the most consistent, that's exactly why I began to find them so repetitive. Now mind you, I don't think too many major changes are needed for the stealth stuff, because as is, it's just kind of boring and irritating at worst. I think a lot of games can take the saying, variety is the spice of life, to heart, to the point where there's so much stuff introduced that it kind of just makes things worse than before, and this is the problem I could see Security Breach having if too much stuff is changed. Anyhow, regardless of what they could do to change staff bots, they should just cut down on these guys or remove them entirely. I've said it already, but these guys are the true threat of the game and not the animatronics. Another thing to cut down on would be hiding spots. Like, emphasizing stealthy gameplay does not have to equal placing 1,000 hiding spots all over the place, and honestly, I get a little bit annoyed whenever newer horror games do this because it feels really lazy and like they're only putting the hiding spots there in place of any kind of like creative gameplay. It just kind of feels to me like they're not very confident in the actual gameplay whenever developers do stuff like this. I think having areas where you can hide would work better rather than having a locker or dumpster you jump into, because this would encourage players to not want to stick around in one area for too long, as standard hiding spots tend to. Now, one thing the game does to try and combat this is have the animatronics occasionally check hiding spots, but I only found this to be a problem a very small handful of times, and a whole lot less so after getting the phaser blast. Seriously, just one hit with this thing to their eyes and they're down for the count. Even if it's just temporary, there's so much here that allows you to avoid animatronics way too easily. I think at most having Freddy be accessible would be okay, but just make him accessible in fewer areas, or at least make him inaccessible in those areas at certain points in the game. For example, the second time the endoskeletons show up, you can very easily call Freddy over and have him carry you past them, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the challenge they were trying to present. Another thing that should have been in the game, and this might sound a little bit weird, but hear me out, fast travel. The Pizzaplex is unbelievably big to its own detriment. Like I said, I circled around the Pizzaplex multiple times later in my playthrough, and a lot of that time spent could have been cut down immensely by introducing fast travel in the recharge stations. There's no real reason not to implement something like this anyway, as I don't think the amount of room the Pizzaplex has is efficiently used, so it ended up feeling like artificial padding to have to constantly go back and forth through this place, even if it isn't entirely what the developers were intending. Dare I bring up the terrible hints again? There is a lot more that could have been done to fix this game too. I've barely scratched the surface here, as the sections in the game could have been much improved too in a lot of intricate ways, and going into all of that would make this video much longer than it already is, so I think I'm just gonna leave it here for my suggestions. Unfortunately, FNAF's Security Breach is likely going to be the first FNAF game I play, and probably the last of the newer titles. From an outsider's perspective, despite saying what I did at the beginning of the video, I do respect what the other titles were able to accomplish, and maybe one day I'll try them out for myself. I don't really want to let one bad experience affect the entire series for me, because there are some positives about it, but going forward, I just don't know if I can support it if there are going to be more games like this. But apparently, this is the direction that Scott wanted the series to go in, so we'll see how that goes, I guess. I'm not even gonna lie to you though, I am sick of thinking about this game. I really want to give it a rest for a bit. Like, honestly, I wanted this to finish much sooner because I had played the game and I was just mentally drained after each new area. I guess that's it then. FNAF Security Breach, a disappointing, mediocre mess of a game. If you like it, then that's okay. I respectfully disagree with you, but I'm glad you can find enjoyment in the game because honestly, I had a hard time with this one. I think I need to take a really long nap now. Like, I don't even feel like doing a proper outro. Like the video if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing, or dislike the video and leave a hate comment if you despised it. I'm Wyrlwind, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and goodbye.